Welcome back to Combat Mission, where we're going to explore the mechanics of being hull down. And we're going to explore it by looking at a theory that goes around the forums and the discords every now and again, namely that if your hull armor is better than your turret armor, fighting hull up is better than fighting hull down. So what do we mean when we talk about going hull down or taking up a hull down position? This is simply a way of exploiting terrain to reduce the profile of a turreted vehicle. We take something like a tank and drive it behind a slope to the point where the hull of the vehicle is down, below the line of the terrain, but the turret is still visible over the top. This means that the vehicle is harder to spot and the hull is protected from incoming fire, but the vehicle can fight just as well. The hull-up armor theory comes in when we consider how units engage a hull-down target in combat mission. In CM, units aim for the centre of mass of whatever they're shooting at. For a hull-up tank, this means that incoming rounds will usually hit the upper front slope. For a hull-down tank, they will usually hit the front of the turret. The idea behind the theory is that a tank with better hull armour than turret armour should stay hull up, because getting hit in the upper front slope is not a problem. That's where the thickest armour is. Most incoming fire is going to pancake or bounce off. On the other hand, if our tank is hull down and the enemy is targeting the front of the turret, any incoming rounds are going to be striking thinner armour and have a better chance of scoring a penetration. On top of that, if engaging head on, the centre of mass of the turret is going to be the tank's main gun, and a hit to that or to the muzzle brake is going to disable it. So the idea is that hull up is safer because there's a lower chance of actual damage. This theory obviously comes with a little baggage. Namely that it only really applies in the World War II context to tanks from one nation in particular. But we're going to explore it because it's an interesting way to examine the advantages of going hull down. So let's get a little bit of data. I've built a firing range with 10 lanes. Each lane is 800 meters long. At one end there's a hull-up Sherman, at the other end there's a Panther. I've done a set of 50 tests with the Panther hull up, and another 50 with it hull down. What I've tracked for each test is how long it takes each tank to spot the other one, how long it takes to get its first round on target, how many hits it scores in total, which tank gets destroyed, if any, and for the Panthers, whether its 75mm gun gets disabled. Hull up, the Panthers spotted first 22 times and got 39 shots on target, compared to the Shermans spotting first 26 times and getting 30 shots on target. If we factor in the technical differences between them, that lines up. The Panther's 75mm gun is much higher velocity than the Sherman's, giving it a flatter trajectory and making it easier to get rounds on target, which would help account for the greater number of hits. Obviously the Panther has another advantage in that they can trade fire where the Shermans can't. When the Panther gets around on target, the Sherman stops shooting. When the Sherman gets around on target, it doesn't do very much and the Panther can respond. It shouldn't surprise anyone to learn that the Panthers won 29 of the 50 hull-up engagements and the Shermans didn't win any of them. The remaining 21 were draws where both tanks survived. So what happens when we put the Panthers hull down? Well, they spotted first 31 times and got 42 rounds on target, compared to the Shermans spotting first 18 times and getting 12 rounds on target. That's not a big change in the number of hits, but the Shermans were definitely at a disadvantage when it came to spotting the hull-down Panthers first. Where it gets really interesting though is when we look at the kills. In the hull-down tests, the Panthers scored the same number of kills as before, 29. But the Shermans actually knocked out 3 Panthers. And they knocked them all out in the same way, an incoming round deflecting off the bottom of the gun mantlet and penetrating the hull roof. Notably, none of the Panthers in any of the tests had their main gun disabled by a direct hit. Regardless, I'm not going to lie here, I wasn't expecting the Shermans to get any kills. I definitely wasn't expecting them to get 3, Maybe it's luck, maybe it's a statistical anomaly that we get ironed out if we did more than 50 tests. Maybe I've managed to inadvertently set the test range up in such a way that the distances, relative heights and ballistics all line up to create the correct angle for that incoming shot to not only ricochet, but ricochet in exactly the right way to penetrate the hull. But what we've got is a situation where the Panthers took no losses when they were hull up, and 3 losses when they were hull down. So there must be some validity to the hull-up theory of protection, right? Well, first it's worth bearing in mind that the gun mantlet ricochet was a particular design flaw of certain marks of Panther. I picked mid-production Panther A's because Combat Mission has them as the standard most common Panther model for the default Battle for Normandy mission date, which is June 1944. Later model Panther G's with the added chin mantlet fixed this problem, which doesn't exist at all for Tiger 1s and 2s. Obviously it's not a problem for other less well armoured tanks at all. So to some extent this is a platform specific issue. There are also a lot of problems with this test in general. Outside of a testing environment, tanks don't usually engage each other head to head down narrow corridors. Head-to-head engagements do happen more often in Combat Mission than they do in reality because it's a game, and there are limits to map size and battle length, but they're also generally a choice. In the context of a wider, more open engagement, it's plausible that some Shermans could have been able to target the flanks of the Panthers. In that context, being hull up presents a much bigger target to the Shermans, who would have had a much easier time knocking out any Panthers with exposed sides. But focusing purely on armour protection is a very shallow way to consider the concept of hull down. To go deeper, we need to get into the good old survivability onion. If anyone is unfamiliar with this, the survivability onion is essentially a list of things to avoid in combat if you want to live. To start with, don't be there in the first place. If you are there, don't get identified. If you get identified, don't get acquired. If you get acquired, don't get engaged. If you get engaged, don't get hit. If you get hit, don't get penetrated. And finally, if you get penetrated, don't get killed. Judging the tactical effectiveness of going hull down or staying hull up through the lens of armour protection, i.e. not getting penetrated, means that you've skipped the first 5 layers of the survivability onion, and you're only one step away from sharing the interior of the vehicle with some very unpleasant physics. And yeah, the armour of some tanks might make it very difficult for the enemy to score penetrating hits, but zooming straight there is missing a fundamental concept of modern warfare. It is much, much more important to avoid being seen than it is to avoid being penetrated. This isn't just about stopping the enemy from getting deeper into our survivability onion and increasing their chances of getting a kill. It's also about maximising our ability to get deep into theirs. If we flip the situation around and consider it from the Sherman point of view, we don't want to get into a head-to-head confrontation with a Panther. Whether it's hull up or hull down, the odds are just stacked against us. So it's absolutely critical for us to find that Panther. Once we know where it is, we can plan our way around it. We can avoid its field of fire, we can smoke it up, we can know where we need to manoeuvre to get onto its flank or rear and hit those less well-armoured arcs. If there aren't any sensible options for our own tanks, we can exploit the combined arms toolbox and bring artillery and close air support to bear. We can sneak infantry anti-tank teams up. We might be able to bypass the Panther or take some key terrain somewhere else that could force it out of position. We have options and we have the initiative. But if we can't find it, we're running the risk of getting ourselves into a situation where our tanks start exploding and we have to scramble to react on the enemy's turns. That second layer of the survivability onion, not getting spotted, is absolutely critical in a broad tactical sense. Modern warfare is not about slugging matches where both sides trade hits and engagements are decided by who has the best armour. It's all about hitting the enemy before they even know you're there, doing maximum damage and disappearing before they can shoot back. Armour protection is absolutely relevant, but it's there as a final layer of defence that should, ideally, never even be tested. In our results here, the Panthers went 22-26 against the Shermans in the spotting race when they were hull up, but they went 31-18 when they were hull down. So the results suggest pretty strongly that being hull down makes you harder to spot, which makes sense because you're presenting a smaller target, and therefore that hull down is a more tactically sensible option. So hull up positions are not a great idea. Even hanging around hull down is suboptimal. The best procedure is to stay turret down or completely out of sight until it's time to engage, then roll forward to hull down, get some rounds down range, pull back to safety, and to rinse and repeat. The idea that certain tanks are counterintuitively more vulnerable when they are hull down is not completely wrong. But to make tactical decisions on the basis that it's better to give the enemy a better target is to fundamentally misunderstand how modern warfare works in a way that is not going to work out in the long run. So, that's a quick once over of the benefits of going hull down. If anybody got the wrong end of the stick here and feels like prancing about hull up because of their amazing front slope, I'm sure your opponents will love you for that. If you'd like to see these videos early and support the channel, you can do so via Patreon and YouTube memberships. Whether you do or not, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.